The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so I did bring on my high school friend's son. His name is Max Sutter. This kid's like a 5-star recruit. He's got like 40 D1 offers. I think he's going to end up at Ole Miss, but he might end up at Alabama or Ohio State. He's like the nation's number 3 ranked tight end or something. But besides Mac, who's not in the bigs yet, you're going to be my first actual professional athlete at one point in his career who's now turned into an amazing social media influencer that is on the Deep Shallow Dive. All right, listen, everybody. Jeremy Slayden is here today, and he's got a better moniker than Ray D because he goes by JSlay USA. I love it, man. How you doing, buddy? It's great to see you.
I'm doing good. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better and seeing your channel and your platform grow as well. And we're going to have a lot of fun, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to set this up for everybody to understand. So Jeremy and I, honestly, we kind of discovered each other. I discovered his JSlay. He discovered Deep Shallow Dive on Instagram. And it was really because we were kind of resonating with the content that each other was posting. And fundamentally, that content was the truth. You know, we'll get into some of the topics that we've talked about. But, you know, what I really liked about Jeremy, and kind of similar to a few other guests that I've brought on recently, is, you know, here's a guy, if you're not looking at Spotify or YouTube right now, if you're just listening, this is like a handsome, all-American guy right here. And what I love, I mean this, dude, and I've told you this off camera, but I want to say it on camera. What I love about you is, again, you are like All America USA, and we're going to start talking about baseball first. But then you are using your platform now to really educate people on Christianity, what it truly means to be a Christian in your eyes. And you're educating people on, you know, situations that are happening in the world, whether that's Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, homelessness, whatever. And I love hearing that from you because honestly, I feel like a lot of Americans, when they look at you, when they hear you, they can relate to you. And sometimes hearing a message from somebody that you can relate to, even on a physical appearance level, I think it's more impactful. So anyway, what I wanted to do to start out is, before we get into the meaty stuff, dude, you were a professional baseball player. That is ridiculously cool. And I think you got drafted by the Phillies. Give us a little, talk us through that. Like, what was that like? What were the minor leagues like? Give us your journey as an athlete first.
Sure. Well, it's a good place to start because, as you said, kind of whether it's what you're talking about, how I look, but just growing up as a young, athletic, white male that wanted to be great at America's pastime, baseball, you know, with a strong family, and we went to church, and it was a very all-American family, and the American dream was very much wrapped into that too. You know, my own father was the son of a diehard alcoholic who, you know, he left the family. So they were dirt poor when they had me, my mom and dad, still in college at the time, while my dad was trying to make it as a baseball player himself while taking engineering classes. You know, so it was one of those like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get it done kind of thing. So when his baseball didn't pan out due to an injury, they had no money. They're trying to make it through college. And here I come on the way. You know, a lot of those dreams were given up. It's like, now I've got to face real life. And that's where, you know, the JSlay stuff came from, a belief in the ability in this country to, you know, all the things that sound like platitudes, but they can happen, or at least they could happen. This is in the early 80s, where you work really hard at something and you do it honestly and you build relationships. My dad was in sales and construction and built a nice, I'll call it a nice platform or cushion for our family to pursue things like sports and music and other things that the American dream, quote unquote, can allow you to do. All right. Again, and look at this through the context of the 80s and 90s. And, me, I actually wasn't that athletic of a young kid, but at around 12 years old, it was like God suddenly kind of blessed me with a sudden athleticism that hit because I really wanted to be good at sports, but I just didn't have the body for it. And then at 12, 13 years old, I kind of shot up and some muscularity developed and my hand-eye coordination really improved all of a sudden. By 16 years old, I was setting records on my high school baseball team. And that was coming from a kid that really nobody was paying attention to when I was 14. 15, I wasn't even playing. I was a, JV kid sitting the bench. 16, I'm batting, we're leading my high school team to 2 state championships in a row and getting pro scouts and college scouts to come to the games and watch. So it was such an exciting time for
What position
family.
did you play? What position did you play?
Yeah, I was outfield.
Okay. So
Corner
like
outfield.
you were the stud of the baseball team. Like you
I
were
would-
the best
well,
player
we-
on the
we-
team?
Well, I want to put it like this. We were ranked the number 6th team in the country, 6th, when I was a sophomore, and we had 3 other guys get drafted before I did. So I would not say that I might have had the best season, but part of that was the guys around me. And I'm not just saying this, they were really good. So it's not like, okay, we're going to pitch around Jeremy to get to, like, they couldn't pitch around anybody.
Got it.
Because the guy behind me was just as good or even older. Now, by my junior and senior seasons, yes, I was the standout. I was the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year, I think twice in a
Holy
row.
mackerel. Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year. That's a big
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, that's amazing.
So all that stuff was going on, and that led to a deep love of this country, kind of for the reasons of I saw my family as a kid go from living on government assistance and food stamps and having nothing to actually being able to live well beyond our means. But well, I shouldn't say it like that. Live within our means, but responsibly, but develop some real, wealth as a family due to hard work and playing by the rules, actually. So there was a pocket there in American history that I know of where think you could do it the right way, make money, and it didn't have to be through cheating or otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that
So-
makes total sense. Okay.
Yeah, so full red, white, and blue, supported our military. All of that stuff was all wrapped up together, and we really didn't have time to get too deep into politics. Generally speaking, being Christians and conservatives and going to church, especially in the Southeast, it kind of centered around, hey, the left wing is more communist in nature. They're a little bit, or they're much, even back in the Bill Clinton days, we saw the left as much more extreme. And the right wing being, the word conservative means to conserve. So we saw that as, hey, we're a nation based on biblical Christian values. So we want to conserve that. But I'll get back to the baseball. So I end up getting drafted out of high school by the San Diego Padres. But around that same time, I had a shoulder injury my senior year. So it really dropped my draft status. I was probably, if I'm being honest, I probably would have gone in the top 5 rounds, maybe like the 2nd to 3rd, 4th round. But instead with that injury, I had a surgery. I couldn't throw at all. So I ended up going to Georgia Tech on a full ride.
Okay.
Had a phenomenal freshman year, went to the College World Series. I broke the freshman home run record. All this amazing stuff was happening, which only lent itself to all that stuff I'm talking about, patriotism and belief in the way that we were doing things as a family and the way that just kind of what we believed in had to be right, because a lot of times, might makes right. And if you're successful, you must be right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that me saying that is going to make some sense later in this interview with some things that I've kind of turned the corner on. But as great as that freshman year was, Ray, I also, baseball had become like an idol in my life, and it became the most important thing. So talking about my Christian faith being a part of all this as well, in the Bible, it talks a lot about put no other gods before him, before the God, and, have no idols, which an idol is something that you care more about than God himself. Well, baseball had become an idol without me. It just kind of sneaks up on you because as a kid, it's what you're valued for. It's what people ask you about if you're good at. Every time I'd come home from an off season in college, all my family, friends, everybody be like, how's Georgia Tech looking next year? Do you think you're going to get drafted? What round? That's where your identity begins to be built. So I get to my junior year and everything breaks down. I was putting so much pressure on myself. I have a major injury in the weight room. I have 2 surgeries that have to happen. I hurt my back. So I had a completely herniated disc. I have to have a back operation and a shoulder surgery because I re-injured my shoulder in the same 6-month time period. I had a girlfriend at the time, and that was all crazy. So life was kind of spinning out from under my control. And all of a sudden, I'm asking myself, like, what's going on, God? I thought you were going to take care of me because I was honoring you with my choices. I was one of those Christian kids that, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I was trying not to have sex. I was trying to keep all the rules,
Yeah.
by what the Bible, what church, what everybody had told me. These are the rules you keep so that God will bless your life. And that can become you probably know the word Pharisee, like a Pharisee, like if I keep all the rules, God's going to bless me. It's
Got it.
it's very Jewish mentality, very Old Testament mentality.
Yeah.
And that was what I was living under, rather than just a straight up, I need to love God and love other people, regardless of the success that I'm having in my personal pursuits. And really, I had a breakdown my junior year, because that was the year I was eligible to get drafted. And by the time you have your second surgery, the pro scouts start to look at you differently. Like, and a third surgery being your back, they were really gun shy about me at this point. So as much of a prospect as I kind of lost a lot of that status. I still got drafted by the Oakland A's. So this is my second draft. So even though I didn't play, the Oakland A's drafted me in like a late round pick. I didn't go. I went back to Georgia Tech for a redshirt junior year. And it was an amazing time, Ray, because even though I hadn't worked out, I wasn't like all those other seasons, I was in tip top shape and well prepared. This one, I'm just happy to maybe get on the field. I'm coming off 2 surgeries. By the midpoint in that season, my redshirt junior year, I'm leading all of Division I college baseball in RBIs, home runs, batting average. It was crazy.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful time. And I was doing it just kind of loving the game and taking it easy and letting things come to me rather than forcing it. And I learned a lot about how to live. I learned a lot about who God really is. I had a beautiful time in my Christian faith because I stopped judging other people as much. Because that's another thing. When you're good at keeping the rules, you become also typically people become very judgmental of others when they are good at, which I happen to be kind of good at keeping those rules for a long period of my life. But I let all that go. I made more friends than I'd ever made. It was just a great time. Back to the story, I ended up getting drafted by the Phillies in the 8th round, which is not bad. I mean, after all I'd been through, I was like, oh my God, like this, I would have gone in the 25th round and taken it, but I got drafted in the 8th round. I got a respectable signing bonus. And my only prayer at that point was, Lord, if I'm going to not make it to the major leagues, which was my childhood dream. I mean, if you asked me, Ray, from 7 years old onward, what do you want to be when you grow up, Jeremy? I would have said, I want to be a major league baseball player. And I remember praying this after I got drafted, said, Lord, if I've got to get knocked out of this game and not make it to the big leagues, just don't let it be because of an injury.
Yeah.
And wonderfully, Ray, I got to play 6.5 really fun time of my life seasons in the minor leagues. I hit every single level. It was a tough journey. I had some great seasons, no doubt about it. We won 2 minor league championships. I got up to AAA. I got to go to big league spring training one year and blew it out of the water. I did end up having a pretty bad injury. That's maybe a story for another day, but it was at the end of that time, which kind of knocked me out. But the truth is, by the time I had that injury and got put out, I was probably past my window of being a prospect. I was 27 years old and I was playing great baseball, but I think knowing me and knowing my temptations and the ability, like especially back then, if I would have had a ton of money as a 27-year-old and got to the big leagues, there's a chance I really could have blown my life up. Like you see a lot of athletes or musicians or anybody else do. So I almost feel like that just was not the path that I was supposed to take, but I was supposed to have that experience to there. And I mean, now I'm living in Tennessee, back close to my hometown, happily married, got 2 little boys. I'm coaching Little League Baseball. I've got a nice day job, and then I get to do something I love in the pursuit of truth with JSlay USA on the side. So I'd love to do it I'd love to do it full time one day. Maybe you can help me with that.
No, totally. I'm going to, dude. I'm going to help put you on the map, man, because I think the map needs you. Well, listen, that was incredibly interesting. My last question on the baseball is just, so that's how it works. Like when you get drafted, do some guys get drafted straight to the bigs? Like they get drafted right away. Everybody goes into single A, double A, triple A.
Yeah. Once in a generation, you'll have a guy that they're like, this guy, but he's usually out of college and the team already kind of needs him. And he may spend a couple months in the minors and they bring him up. I mean, but that is super rare.
Super rare. Okay.
Most of the time you work your way up slowly. And the hard part is, like, if I would have been a 1st round draft pick or a 2nd round draft pick and played the same baseball that I played as an 8th rounder. So, cause I had some really great seasons. I led my team usually in RBIs and home runs.
Yeah.
I didn't blow it out of the water, but I had very respectable seasons. Had I done that as a first round pick, I probably would have had been to the big leagues much sooner and gotten that shot, because you are the big investment. They want to
Yeah.
make good on that investment.
Sure.
When you're an eighth round pick, unless there's a big need for you, you've really got to earn it. I happened to be with the Phillies. So when I got drafted was in 2005. Well, by the time I was in double A in 2008, and usually you get called up to the big leagues from double A, triple A is kind of a holding ground for if you're injured or maybe you're going to go up next month. They may throw you up in triple A for a little while.
Okay.
But, when I was in double A and got invited to the All-Star game and all this stuff, that was the year the Phillies won the World Series. So they didn't have any needs for minor league talent at that point.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it went out.
Interesting.
Yeah, and right after that, you win the World Series, they had all this money. They went out and bought a bunch of high-profile major league talent to put as backups.
Got
So
it.
it actually worked against all the minor league guys when they won the World Series, because they had so much money and capability at that point to stack up their bench.
Got it. Got it. Did you ever face any pitchers we'd know, like any of the guys in the bigs that you remember?
Several, a lot of the time though, the reason I did is because they were down and they were injured or whatever.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
One for example is like Roger Clemens. He was on the tail end of his career when
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean that's such a marquee name. He came in, he walked me, he threw like I think like one strike on the inside corner and then four balls just off the plate away.
That's
So
hilarious.
kind of a
Hey,
boring
dude, that's
hat.
Roger Clemens. That's
Yeah.
legit, man.
But I've
That's
faced
very
a ton
cool.
of guys, and now like then it's nothing's coming to mind, but like tons of guys that made it and spent 2-3 years in the big leagues, and now they're not there anymore. So I
Yeah.
faced a lot of big league talent, but at the top of my head, Clemens is the only name coming to mind.
All right, very cool. Okay, that was awesome. I really wanted to kind of have that conversation because, first of all, I think it's incredibly interesting, but I also think it does set up kind of the rest of what we want to talk about and really why you and I even got connected. And that is, to go into things that matter and to go into things that are happening, in the world today. Let's start with, growing up as a Christian. Like, you asked me in one of our exchanges, you're like, hey, by the way, what is your faith? And I said, I don't really have a faith. Technically I'm Muslim, but I don't practice that religion. I'm spiritual in nature. And then I shared with you, I said, hey, I treat people by the golden rule. I really like that. I treat people the way I want to be treated. And I really do try to live by that. But what I'd love for you to do now is talk about growing up Christian and what is that? What does that mean? And then you can even take that and help us understand the John Hagees of the world, like this Christian evangelical and Christian Zionism. I think this will be fascinating for this audience to hear that from you.
Sure. Well, I'll start with my personal experience, and then you can guide me into where you want to take it next. So when you say to an American, what's your experience like being a Christian, you're going to get a ton of different answers depending on their faith tradition, their denomination, where they're at in the country, all of that. And there's a lot of cultural Christianity where they, kind of like you said about being a Muslim, they would say, well, I'm Christian, but I'm not practicing, but generally I identify with a Christian background or worldview. And they'll say Judeo-Christian a lot because that's just what it's what they've been told, even if they have no idea what that means or the contradictions of that word. For me, though, being a Protestant evangelical Christian in the Southeast meant that you took it pretty darn seriously if you were going to be involved in church. So we're going to read our Bibles. We're going to go to church on Sunday mornings. We're going to go to church on Sunday nights. And we're going to go to either a Bible study or a prayer group on Wednesday nights. And on top of that, we may have a family-ran Bible study with members of our community that we're friends with that we want to go deeper in reading the Word, reading the Bible, learning what God's plan for us is in our life. I see all of those as really good things. But layered on top of that, evangelical means to go out and spread the gospel, to proclaim God's word to the world.
Okay.
Or to spread the good news. Now that's where it becomes difficult. And this would be true, I think, of any religion, especially in a multicultural environment. I mean, so my Christian faith, in some ways I was respected for it because especially in the 80s and 90s, there was a general respect for those who held to biblical values. However, if you started trying to really live by it and talk to others about your faith, two things would happen. on the one hand, you would be pretty much rejected by the cool kids at school because you're not going to be going and partying with them. There's a lot of things that they're going to do that you either can't or that you would frown upon. So they would say that you're judging them, even though you're really not wanting to judge them. You're wanting to be friends with them, but you kind of can't. So it's a little bit of a conundrum where you're judging each other. So that's tough as a kid. On the other hand, though, I've got a lot of really, really great experiences sharing my faith with members of my baseball team, kids at school, what have you, where I would share, like, this is who Jesus is to me. This is the plan of salvation. This is why I believe that we need the Lord. And if you feel like something is missing in your life, you feel like this world is not providing a satisfaction at a deep level, that's where Jesus comes in. And I would share my personal story backed up by Bible verses that I knew. And a lot of times, man, we'd go really deep and become great friends because of that. And some of them would come to believe as well. So those are the two core things I'd say about being an evangelical is.
And by the way, when you say the Bible, which Bible are you talking about? Old Testament or New Testament? And then I'm just going to throw these out and you explain them. Like, I've heard there's, the King James Bible. I don't know what that is. There's a Schofield Bible. I know kind of what that is because I think there's a lot of controversy with that. But like when you say I would read the Bible, I would go to classes on Wednesday, I would do this. Which Bible are we talking about?
Let me give a visual aid to the audience. Give me thoughts.
Okay. Amazing. All right, everybody, hold on. JSlay is getting a visual aid. It's the first time we've had visual aids on the Deep Shallow Dive. I love it.
And bear with me. I've got a cough and a cold right now. So
yeah, that's all good.
Here is a King James Bible. This is an Old and New Testament.
Okay. So for everybody not watching on Spotify or YouTube, Jeremy just held up a King James Bible, which is the Old and the New Testament.
Old and new. Everything I'm going to hold up is old and new. So I'll make this quick. Yeah. So here's a New International Version Bible, which is Old and New Testament. Here is a contemporary English version of the Bible that's got a lot of archaeological stuff in it as well. But it is Old and New Testament. So I want to make something very clear and for you too, Ray. So the King James Bible, the Schofield Bible, the ESV, the NIV, all the acronyms, most of them are based on the same original texts of the Old and New Testament. What we're talking about here are variances in translation. Okay. And that's where you can get kind of bad or shoddy translations of the Bible or really loose ones that take a lot of liberties. But for me, all of those Bibles that I held up are acceptable. But yes, for an evangelical Christian or really Catholic, they have a couple of extra books called the Apocrypha, which you go back into the councils where they were deciding which Bibles would go in and which wouldn't. There was just some slight disagreements there. So there might be 4 or 5 extra books in the Catholic Bible. But it is the Old and New Testament. And what you're talking about, Ray, is various translations. Now, I think I should make this point now. The Schofield Bible is a King James Bible. It is. Okay. Because that was the most popular Bible of the time. So when Cyrus Schofield was writing that Bible, this is back just before 1909 when he released it, he was using King James. Now, what he did was he added notes and he added chapter headings and subheadings, which had never been there before. So he would take a passage of the Bible, and there weren't even that many study Bibles at the time. Like Ian Carroll and the country singer John Rich, they've had some popular reels. They have been saying this wrong. They're saying he made his own Bible. No, he didn't. He took a normal traditional King James Bible, but he added headings that had his own slant. He added subheadings, which added a slant, and then he would add notes. And the problem with that was they were very, very Zionist in terms of modern day Israel, and another word, dispensational in their interpretation of the traditional King James Bible. And he was super, like he shouldn't have been, he was super connected to the top Bible school leaders in the country. So his Bible went into all of the curriculum. And what happened is because the notes, the headings and the subheadings were appearing on the same page with the Holy Bible, the Word of God, the seminary students and the Bible students all began to take it as gospel. So they'd be like, okay, here's what the Bible says, but here's what it means. And it was based on Schofield's interpretation. So I stopped there to make that point because I think too many people have been saying the wrong thing. And I'll tell you, pastors that are feeling the heat about this, they are jumping at the chance to say Ian Carroll's wrong and John Rich is wrong.
Yeah.
And they were wrong in their semantics, but the truth of the matter is it's Schofield's notes that really infiltrated into the Christian Bible schools.
Okay. So that's very interesting. So Ian Carroll, I've talked about him a bunch on the podcast and he's really blown up. John Rich, I know he's a famous country music star. And I listened to his episode on Tucker Carlson where he talked about the Schofield Bible and all that. It seemed to me what Ian and John Rich said, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they positioned it as this Schofield person being linked to maybe the Zionist at the time or evangelical Christians. He wrote his own Bible, but what you're helping us understand is that was almost like taking the King James and maybe creating a version of it with headers and with his notes and all that. I think the controversy right now surrounds the fact that people like John Rich or Ian Carroll are saying that the way he did that, it molded the Schofield Bible into something that benefits modern day Israel and also benefits the Zionist movement at the time.
No doubt.
And so they were saying that was strategically done. I think that's probably accurate,
very
right?
strategically done. So all I was doing was correcting a semantic error.
Got it. Yeah. No, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, because that's very important. He used a traditional King James text Bible, but he was very connected to high-powered Zionists at the time, like Samuel Untermeyer was the one who approved his acceptance onto the literary committee of the Lotos Club. Now, I don't want to lose the audience here. Let me lay a foundation for what was going on. Cyrus Ingerson Schofield was he was a little-known preacher. He was trying to make a name for himself. He was a very mysterious, enigmatic figure who, in his life history, he disappears for 5 years here, 5 years there. All he'd ever written were sectarian pamphlets for specific denominational groups. So not well known at all. At the time he was admitted to New York's Lotos Club, that's Lotos, all right, and it's still around today, and it is a highfalutin group. Mark Twain was a member. You had the Carnegies that were members.
Yeah.
You had presidents giving speeches there. And all of a sudden, Cyrus Schofield, this little known guy, not only gets accepted on their literary committee with Mark Twain and others, but he lives there. It's his own salary as a little known pastor in Pennsylvania at the time. He got known as a pastor in Texas, but then he went to Pennsylvania. His salary would not cover the dues to be a member there or the meals or any of that. So he was being funded to be a part of this. Now, why would he get that position? I believe it's because they could have blackmailed him very easily. And I can go back to that later, but Samuel Untermeyer, who was a very powerful Zionist Jew, he was on I think the American Jewish Council at the time. He had a big hand in creating the creation of the Federal Reserve. He had the ear of the president at the time, along with Bernard Baruch, who was a friend of his. So these were guys who were very involved with what was going on with Theodore Herzl and the World Jewish Congress, which their entire goal was to create the modern nation state of Israel. All right.
Yep.
All right. So little known fact here. This is going to blow the mind of the people that have not heard this before. It wasn't determined exactly where the modern state of Israel was going to be placed. Herzl, even though he wanted to be in Palestine, there was a lot of dissension, and they were looking at various areas. All right, the decision was made. I believe it was either 1905 or 1906. The World Jewish Congress was being held in Basel, Switzerland. That's when they decided it's going to be in Palestine. We're going to do this there when we get to do it. Okay, guess where at that time? Because that's at the sweet spot of when Cyrus Schofield was writing the notes of his Schofield Bible. Of all places he could be to take a sabbatical or a vacation with his wife at the time to spend a year or more to write down these notes, he was staying only
in Basel, Switzerland.
Well, a short train ride away in Switzerland. I forget the name of the town. It's in my article. If you want to go deep on Schofield, and I lay all of this out with cited sources, you can go to my Substack, JSlayUSA.com. That'll take you right there. My Schofield article's there, and I dig deep into this man's history and who was funding him, supporting him. So I say all that to say this, Ray. He was heavily involved with both Zionist causes, Zionist money, and you don't just by coincidence end up just outside of the World Jewish Congress where they're making a decision on where the future of Israel is going. When you're writing these notes that are going to change American history as it relates to Zionism and our feelings about modern day Judaism.
And it really did change American history about that. You know what I just realized? Schofield was Jeffrey Epstein before Jeffrey Epstein. What do you think about that analogy?
Say it again?
Schofield was Jeffrey Epstein. He was the original Jeffrey Epstein. Like, he was the original guy that maybe was put in that position as the writer of that version of the Bible in order to basically create a narrative that they wanted to use. Now, not directly similar to Epstein, but to me, Jeffrey Epstein, and I do want to talk about Epstein.
Epstein was it's a well-made point. I think Epstein was a little bit more in control of his own destiny. To say he was the guy blackmailing others.
He was the blackmail guy, yeah.
But he could also be blackmailed. I mean, but yes, I believe that Cyrus Schofield was chosen as that guy who he could easily be taken down. He really wanted to build up his reputation and his own personal power. I mean, you're talking about a guy that left his first family and left them hanging out to dry. And once he made money, he never supported his destitute wife or daughters or son. His son wasn't even a Christian. So they just found a guy that they could easily control. And if they needed to, easily pull out the rug from under. And it's basically like, if you will keep your mouth shut and you'll do this, we will give you this. And
I totally agree, man. I totally agree. All right. You know what? Let's move into Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to move off script a little bit because I think the only guy who's had better memes about Epstein than me is you. Because some of your stuff I die laughing at.
Well,
all right, dude. What's your take? What's your take on this? What is going on?
Well, I think the 10,000 level take. Regardless of memes or anything else, is you have the most Zionist bought off administration, cabinet, and Congress in American history right now. For as many good things as Trump, Trump administration, his cabinet, absolutely, and our entire Congress, maybe minus Thomas Massey and maybe Rand Paul, and we'll get into those guys in a second. All right, and a couple hard leftists, Rashida Tlaib and others, but they're opposed to it for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I was going to say the hard leftists, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Ilhan Omar, the Squad, even Jamal Bowman, who's not in office anymore. They're opposed to it because they have Trump derangement syndrome,
and it's a hard left thing.
Yeah.
It's a very different angle than where I would come from. But so where was I going with that? Oh, so I think what you have right now is, Epstein and his secrets are the golden egg that could take down a lot of people on both sides of the aisle and expose the elites that are controlling both sides. Because there's a level, I think, way above Trump. And I think it's those old families, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and others that are working out of the city of London, working out of DC, out of the Vatican, and out of Jerusalem and out of Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of Mossad involvement in all of it, as we've seen with JFK, the recent release of those files. So I guess the point I'm making in a roundabout way is you have a president and administration that's saying we're the most transparent in history, promises made, promises kept, except we got to redact these for national security.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason they gave us what they did on JFK, where it said, please redact this, which they unredacted on this recent release, is because they know this is so long ago now. And we've got the Christian Zionist and the leftist Zionists. When I say leftist Zionists, I mean like the Chuck Schumers and others. We've got them so well in hand, they'll just ignore it. They won't even care. And the regular baby boomer Christians that would care, they're so in love with Israel, they won't even look. So it's kind of a brazen slap in the face to people like you and me to say, yeah, we'll put it out there for you because there's nothing you can do about it.
I didn't even look at the recent release of the JFK files because I was like, this is going to be a nothing burger. But I know you did. So are you saying there's actual evidence in there that links the JFK's assassination to Israeli Mossad?
Yeah, well, Mossad was barely created at the time. So again,
okay. Yeah.
People that are out to shut people up like me will take any semantic thing I say wrong and use it against me. But I would say this, the points to the Jewish elite power structure in Israel. It does point to Israeli intelligence. It says it directly. And at the bottom of a lot of these, I'm actually surprised you hadn't seen it. At the bottom of a lot of these documents, it says, please redact anything in brackets. So we've actually had these documents before. They've already been released, but they were redacted. The part that was redacted was anything that said anything about Shin Bet, which is the kind of defense. It's sort of the Mossad for the homeland, the Israeli intelligence, or anything to do, even when there was one line in there on one of the pages that said, now that we have our Jewish backers and Jewish money, when either we or they get it done, we'll be scot-free, or something like, something along those lines. I've posted some of this stuff, but you can find these documents easily now on people's Instagram. But beyond that, you can find it on the .gov website. I forget, the archives.gov. They're there. So yes, it directly does implicate. And what you'll find is people like me are talking about it a lot, but people like the DC Dranos of the world, and all of the big influencer platforms that have 1 million plus or more, they're just like, oh, we always knew the CIA. We always knew the CIA was corrupt. This proves it. They're purposely obfuscating the truth because they're being paid to keep their mouth shut.
Yeah. So they're almost blaming the CIA and maybe the concept of the military industrial complex and not wanting Kennedy to pull out of Vietnam, right? And maybe putting it on Lyndon B. Johnson a little.
Yeah. Well, it's a group effort. So let's make no mistake, the CIA was corrupt, and the CIA, to certain aspects of the CIA, were working with Israeli intelligence to get this done. It was as it relates to Israel, the big win for them in all of this was JFK was coming to seriously question our support of Israel at the time. He was trying to get the American Zionist Council. I believe that's what it was.
Yeah.
That was later to become AIPAC. All right.
Right.
So he wanted them to register under the Foreign Agency Registration Act, or FARA.
FARA.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
He wanted them to do that. That was making them very upset. Candace Owens does a fantastic show that breaks all this down. So that's one aspect. The other is, at that time, David Ben-Gurion was the prime minister of Israel. He was in a big fight with JFK because JFK wanted them to stop testing nuclear weapons in Dimona, and he wanted to be able to inspect their nuclear facilities to make sure that it was within the parameters that the U.S. was going to allow, something like that. And he also wasn't just willing to give them all the money they were wanting at the time. Well, LBJ, who was a big-time Zionist and also wanted to be president, you can see how this is kind of a win-win-win, right?
100%,
so
dude.
The CIA works.
It was a perfect storm what they set up.
You got it. You got it. And this is why Jack Ruby, or Jack Rubenstein, he took out Oswald so that Oswald could never testify. He says, I did it for my people.
Yeah.
That's a famous.
And by the way, how crazy is it that his name is Jack Rubenstein, but history has appointed him Jack Ruby? I mean, obviously they didn't want Rubenstein to be the name. No, dude, this is so interesting. You know, what you said earlier, I thought was so good, where you're like, the reason they put out the unredacted JFK files is they're basically saying, here you go, but you can't do anything with this. Or what did you say? You said, like, there's nothing you guys can do with it. And I'm talking guys like me and you, or truth tellers. Like right now, in terms of the big media, the big independent media, to me, the top level truth tellers are Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. They are really saying it. They are really saying it. But Rogan's not saying it. I don't see Joe Rogan really saying it. You know, he brought Ian Carroll on, and it was an okay episode, but I don't see Rogan really being as honestly as transparent as I think he should be, because I know Rogan gets it. He's too smart not to get it.
Well, they're even Candace and even Tucker, they're managing their audience, they're hedging their bets to some degree. So if Candace knows more than she's letting on, the way she says things, you know, when she tries to blame some of the Jewish evil energy on the Frankists, and that's a loose term, but by me saying Jewish evil energy, what I mean is stuff that's written in the Talmud that very much dictates some of the evils that we see.
Yeah.
coming from the Jewish religion. And I'm sorry, it's just a fact. She's not going to say that because it's a dangerous place for her. Tucker Carlson is willing to say some things and question some narratives, but he mostly lets his guests do it. And a lot of times he plays dumb. Right?
He does. He
Joe
does.
Rogan, I simply think, just doesn't know enough. He doesn't know the right questions to ask. You know, he's coming from a non-Christian perspective. I think he's generally like wants freedom and wants, good things and wants a fun conversation.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. That's
But
fair.
I
That's
don't
all
think,
fair.
yeah, I think all of them have to some degree. They're like a governor on on a muffler on an engine. Like they're holding back a little bit.
Yeah.
But I very much applaud what Candace and what Tucker have been willing to say, because they have risked. There's no doubt they've risked a lot.
I think so too. And with the size of platforms that they both have, and you're totally right. Tucker doesn't say it because he's super close with Trump, obviously. And I want to get into the Trump stuff here in a second, but he brings the right strategic guests on in order to let them say it. Speaking of guests, you just had Phil Turney on, who is a very kind of outspoken and getting a lot of notoriety as the spokesperson for the USS Liberty situation. Yes. Do us a favor. And by the way, I'm going to link your episode in this because I would love everyone, if they want to hear that episode in its entirety, to do it, because I think it's worth it. But give us a summary of that interview you did with Phil, and kind of, where he nets out on all this and what is he trying to get accomplished.
Well, God bless that man and what he's been through and imagine when you're 20 years old, your ship is attacked, and you watch 34 of your shipmates die in agonizing ways. No one and it's Israel that did it. You've seen the Star of David on the torpedo boats. You saw the Star of David on the helicopters. You saw Star of David on the jets that were shooting missiles, torpedoes, machine gun fire, everything. Well over 100 wounded. And him and the doctor worked on repairing bodies for 17 hours before anyone came to help. And he's immediately told by his flag admiral, this I'll never forget this part of the story. He said he took off his stars, slapped them on the desk, said, "Guys, I'm just like your father. I'm just like your dad. I need you to tell me everything." So he had a very open, guys, tell me what happened. And they poured their hearts out to this man. They cried, they wept. They said it was Israel that attacked us. Then he puts his stars back on, turns beet red in the face, and said, "I'm not your dad anymore. Don't any one of you SOBs ever mention a word of this to anyone, especially the media or your families. Because if you do, you're going to find yourselves in jail, or even worse." Do you know what even worse means? And they all basically said, "Yeah, we know what that means." And they thought to themselves, if they were willing to work with Israel, if our government was willing to work with Israel to take out our ship, then they would probably put us in jail or kill us if we talked about it. So for 18 years, every one of them stayed 100% silent.
And Phil was one of those guys, right? So Phil was one of those guys that stayed silent. So somebody told him this back in 60, whatever.
Nobody. What do you mean told him this?
I mean, when you're saying are you saying someone took, because Phil was on that boat, right? Yeah. Like he was a young.
It was a flag admiral, so a highly decorated. I don't know the exact level.
Got it. The flag admiral,
a guy way above even their own captain and everything else.
Got it. Okay.
That came to meet with the survivors and basically tricked them into telling him everything, just to say, "We're going to kill you if you ever talk about this." And they even had to sign a letter saying they would never sue the state of Israel or the United States, and they were given $200
my goodness,
to keep quiet.
So what is it now? All of a sudden, really over the past year, that Phil is everywhere. Like he's been on Candace. That was an amazing episode. Jake Shields brought him on. That was good. Your episode was great. He was on the Berm Pit. What is it now? All of a sudden that he feels, I guess, not scared anymore to come talk about it.
Well, I don't think he was since 1982. He's not been scared, but he was not given an audience. So it goes back to the Zionist control of the media, the Zionist control of both wings, and the Zionist control of our churches. Even churches do not want to hear Phil Turney's story because it flies in the face of, did I lose you, Ray?
No, we're here. Go,
Okay.
keep going.
Because it flies in the face of their golden calf of Israel being God's chosen people and this special land that we have to bless at any cost to ourselves. And then he comes along and tells this very disturbing story, and it just doesn't make any sense. Now I'm talking about to the Christian church, but like a Charlie Kirk, for instance,
Yeah.
it's evil and I like Charlie generally in terms of his politics, but it's evil what he is doing, or extremely naive. And it's hard to say a guy as smart as him is this naive to call out anyone that talks about the USS Liberty as a conspiracy theorist. That's an evil thing.
Crazy.
And he's denying the suffering and the truth and the justice of what has happened. And before I get into why Phil Turney is suddenly blow up, let me say this. The reason it happened was very similar to JFK. The CIA was working alongside Israeli intelligence in order to make a geopolitical move that they wanted. So when that happened was right during the 6-Day War. Israel was fighting Egypt right on the Nile Delta or whatever, and they wanted more American support. They wanted to get us into a world war on their behalf. So they wanted to sink the ship. That's why they sent in not only jets, not only torpedo boats, but also helicopters with machine guns to finish them off. They tried everything they could to sink the ship, and then when it went on too long and it didn't sink, word got out this is going to be proven a false flag, so they took off. The Israelis took off.
They wanted to sink the ship and blame Egypt, right?
You got it.
They wanted to blame Egypt in order to bring the United States more into that 6-day war. You know, I had these two brothers on, the Dowd brothers, and they talked exactly about that. And, you know, it's all related, man. This USS Liberty thing is all related with everything and the history of Egypt and Palestine and even to the present day. Okay, you know what? That was a great explanation. I had never connected those dots like that.
But let me finish one thing, because you asked me how did he blow up. Just 2 words, really. Candace Owens. He wrote a letter to Candace Owens. She read it. It touched her, and she said, I'm bringing him on. And she is such a platform now that is independent and free of Zionist control that he was able to tell his story for a massive audience. And it was a massive audience that was hungry for it, because people are starting to seriously question, especially the younger generations, the truth about what Israel is, what they're doing, what we're taught in our churches about it, and what we're told by our politicians about it. And they hear that story, and it's blowing up, because they're like, these are undeniable facts, because Phil brings the evidence. It's not just what he says. There's documentation, there's radio transcripts, there's audio recordings of, like, one of the Israeli fighter jet pilots that called back into his command said, wait, this is America, right? And they said, you have your orders, attack.
That's insane.
I mean, you can't argue with that.
You can't. So let me ask you this, like, in the Christian community, what you just said, you said young people and others are starting to question things. Is that happening within these Christian churches? Is that happening in the Christian community? Because you're appealing to me in so many ways, but the fact that you are a Christian and you recognize this, Candace is the same. I mean, Candace recognizes it. Tucker, same. He recognizes it. Is this really starting to kind of become a thing?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it is. Now, I would say the evangelical Christian church is going to be the slowest to move, because they're the ones that are most in love with Israel. The Catholic Church has historically had problems with the Jewish people, and they never bought into dispensationalism, which is where that gets into the history of Christian Zionism, is from something called dispensationalism, and Catholicism really never bought into it. So that's a history maybe we could talk about another time. But yes, it's happening, and it better happen, Ray, because a lot of Christians want the best for all people, including Jewish people. Okay, we want that. Now, it's not to say we're not willing to fight, and it's not to say that we're just willing to get stepped on. But if we just let because the non-Christian community and the hard left, and the people that, and I'm not casting shade on you, Ray, or where you stand, but I'm saying people that would not be as friendly at all would just say an eye for an eye. Those people took out the USS Liberty. Those people took out our president. Those people have been conniving. They're going to see it as they're all evil. We need Christians in the mix, and we need good-hearted people in the mix that are going to say, let's take a nuanced approach. There's been a lot of evil done to our country from both the Jewish state of Israel and from Talmudic Judaism and what it says in the Talmud. It's undeniable So let's be thoughtful and measured in how we're going to approach this. Because if we get this wrong, it could be disastrous. It could truly be
Okay.
disastrous.
We might have to do a whole another show on that. Yeah, I don't know anything about the Talmud, like all that stuff. I don't know anything about. For me, honestly, you know what's crazy, man? My, I don't know, awakening or whatever you want to call it, it's really been two major events. COVID, when COVID happened, I just was like, this is crazy. I've grown up in the United States my entire life, and I've never been told not to leave my house. This is really weird. And it caused me to kind of wake up to things. And then I would say my education when it comes to just the situation in Israel and Palestine and Gaza and all that, I didn't know anything about that area before October 20th of 2023. October 7th happened. When that happened, I was like, dude, that is terrible. Hamas is awful. What a bunch of losers, blah, blah, blah. And what's funny is, I mean, I don't know if that was you. I know that was Candace, because she has said that's exactly where she was. She's like, I didn't know anything about anything.
Well, she worked
until, yeah, she worked for Prager University and Daily Wire, like that's insane. But
two Jewish-led entities.
Yeah, to measure it. Exactly. But that's when my education of it started. And again, even to this day, I just like to call a spade on this stuff. I really do. And it's calling balls and strikes. You know what I mean? You look at October 7th, awful. The fact that one innocent civilian or even military died that day is one too many. The hostages, that's awful. My heart goes out to any family that's had to deal with their loved one being a hostage for almost coming up on a year and a half or 2 years by now. That is all terrible. But everything that's happened post October 7th to the Palestinian side, what I have a hard time with, and people that I have a hard time with, is people that can't show empathy to that as well. You really need to show empathy to both sides of that. And that's kind of been my education process.
No doubt. But, looking at October 7th, we've got to look. I look at it like this, Ray. I think that Hamas is one of the most important parts of Netanyahu's military.
Interesting. Okay.
What I mean by that is this, because people are going to go, whoa, what are you talking about? Netanyahu was on the out and out in that country. He was probably not going to be prime minister much longer. He, back from the days of his father, he's very invested in the Greater Israel Project and wants that land. This hostage-taking situation and all of that happened from Hamas, I believe he knew it was coming. I believe that high-level elite Jewish intelligence, Israeli intelligence, knew that it was coming, approved and green flagged it. Yep, bring them on. And let them do their thing. Let them through the gate in 14 different places. Let them kill people. And then we're going to go in and blast it to bits with our Hannibal directive and make the death count way worse. And then, because of our Zionist control of the media, especially in America, all we've got to say is this was our 9/11. Please support the poor Jewish people that have been through the Holocaust. Look at what they've done.
Yeah.
And they got a ton of support, but they also had a lot of people like you and me that were like, wait a minute. Something's not right here. You've got a country the size of New Jersey with one of the top air fleets in the world, where a helicopter can get anywhere in the whole nation within 15 minutes and nobody shows up for 7.5 hours. Are you serious? That's why I say this was a powerful part of Netanyahu's plan, Netanyahu's army. And it's not just him. He's just the figurehead, right?
He's the figurehead. Absolutely.
This goes back, Ray, to as they were wanting to create their state, they learned this pattern. You ever heard of the King David Hotel?
The King David. Yes, I have.
So the King David Hotel before 1948, this would have been, I think, early 40s. Palestine was still controlling the area, kind of managing the tensions between the Arabs and the Jewish people. The Jewish people at the time, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, and the Haganah, those were the three fighting forces. They were fighting dirty, man. They were ready for Palestinians and Arabs to get out of what they considered their land. It was time. And the intelligence offices of the British, I may have said Palestinians earlier. I meant the British and the Arabs were in the area, right?
Got it. Yeah.
The British intelligence was at the King David Hotel. So it was either the Haganah, Irgun, or Stern Gang. I can't remember which one. They dress up as Arabs. They put a bunch of bombs in the building dressed as Arabs, leave the place. It blows up and kills nearly 100 people, mostly British, but some Jews and some Christians and some Palestinians, because they just wanted them out. And actually it kind of worked, because Britain not long after said, we're done, we're out of here.
Yeah.
But think about it. They went and they dressed up as their enemy. They blew something up to get their way. And even and Menachem Begin, who was one of the masterminds behind that attack, he later becomes prime minister and one of the first prime ministers of the Likud party.
Wow.
Which is what Netanyahu is the prime minister of. So I don't mean to go too deep into Israeli history or politics, but man, if you want to understand how they have formed a game plan that they know works, and they do it
totally. I listen, the 9/11 analogy makes so much sense. And I've been on record on this podcast saying, I mean, I think Hamas is fake. I think they're completely, if not fake, there are ancillary forces behind them, being Netanyahu first and foremost. And by the way, there's article after article from 2014 to 2017 to 2019 that shows how Netanyahu actually funded Hamas, or allowed the Qatari government to continue to fund Hamas in order to drive that wedge between Hamas and Gaza versus the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas and all that.
Yes.
So I think all of that absolutely makes a lot of sense. Getting back to the Epstein files and all that, I mean, that's never going to come out. Like I think it's hilarious that Trump ran under this, and then Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and even Pam Bondi and all these people were like, 24 hours after the inauguration, we're releasing the Epstein files full tilt. And here we are 60 days later, and they're still kind of, nothing.
If anything, to protect their own reputation, I wouldn't put it past them to create a false list of people who have mostly died already.
Probably
with some notable figures, maybe they'll get a couple fall guys that they want to take out anyway that are on the left wing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't doctor a list and give it out to the public, say, look, we did it, because they're between a rock and a hard place. You can't say that you care about the truth more than any other administration in history, and that you're more transparent than any other administration in history, while at the same time, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, all of them say that they're the most staunchly supportive of Zionism and Israel as any administration ever. I mean, it's almost pathetic hearing Dan Bongino. He was asked, what do you really care about, Dan? What's something that really appeals to your heart? He said, defending the state of Israel. He said that recently on a podcast. So do you think he is going to, or Pam Bondi or any of them, are going to go after the truth on something that's going to expose their golden calf, their idol? No.
Yeah.
They're not.
By the way, this golden calf analogy, is there a calf involved in something religious?
Yes. That is the traditional, like when Moses, this is interesting you bring this up, when Moses went up Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, most famous moment maybe in Old Testament Jewish history. And he comes down, the Jewish people had already turned from God, and they'd taken all the golden earrings and the arm clasps and everything they had that was gold, melted it down, and created a golden calf. So a baby, cow, golden calf to worship as an idol, and that's commonly used now to whenever you're talking about idolatry or worshiping something less than God, it's a golden calf. So yeah, sorry I didn't explain that.
No, that's okay. That's interesting. It struck a bell with me. Okay, let's talk about Trump for a minute, because, and I'll say this because you've been on record saying it, that you voted for him. I voted for him. So I'm not ashamed of that. And I know you're not ashamed of it. By the same token, I'll speak for myself and then I'll let you speak. I've been very vocal about the criticisms I've had about things that have happened, the criticisms about Doge. I think in concept, it's great, but there's no transparency there. I'm not so naive just to believe everything that comes out of Elon Musk's mouth because he's a billionaire. That doesn't that doesn't work with me, as a critical thinker, and I know it doesn't work with you. And so, I have a lot of concerns about even Trump right now. Like, I don't feel he's the same guy that he was in maybe 2016, maybe even 2020. I just feel like, I don't know, man, something's different. And I'm seeing maybe the breakdown of what he claimed was the deep state, and they're almost forming their own techno oligarch deep state of their own. It's like, it's very concerning. And I'm concerned about war with Iran. That to me feels like that is like, they're just setting us up for that. What do you think's going on?
I'll speak in some general terms here. I'm just going to speak my mind. Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think he is a different guy than he was in 2016. In 2016, he made fun of Marco Rubio and other politicians for taking money from the Adelsons. He said there'll be an Israeli puppet in the White House. They're taking all this Adelson money. Now, who's taken more money than anybody from the Adelsons in history? Donald Trump. And you add the hundreds of millions from AIPAC over the last 3 voting cycles or campaigns, and it's hundreds of millions there. I mean, this is a man who's gone from being, I think, in opposition to I think what we saw in 2016, where he shocked the world and all of the corporate media, the leftist media was just up in arms. I think that was real. I don't think that was the staged act. And I think he was a very powerful figure at the time. And I think in 2020, I think they were still scared of it. They didn't want him. I do think the 2020 election was stolen. But I think they've been formulating a plan because they saw the American people are really losing trust in our election integrity. Even the baby boomers are like not believing us anymore after COVID. We've got to give them something to reframe their belief or reinvigorate their belief in our voting system. And nobody's going to believe it if Kamala Harris wins. So we're going to put up a puppet like Kamala, versus somebody that seems all American and all this stuff. And he's absolutely going to win. In terms of the assassination attempt, here's my thought on that, because I think it plays a role. I don't know who took the shot. I don't care about that kid. I do think he was allowed to go up there. I think he could have been a total patsy. I think that there was a shot taken because the Zionist, the real money in this world, the real power in this world right now is coming out of Israel and coming out of Jewish interests across the world. Israel's just like the heartbeat, but it's around the world, and they have so much freaking money and power and control. I think they took that shot and they thought, if we kill him, great. We'll put in somebody like Nikki Haley that already wants to do everything that we want us. We won't have to even pay her. She signs bombs for us.
Yes, she does.
If we don't kill him, he'll know absolutely who's in charge, and that if he steps out of line on these big geopolitical issues, we'll take him out, or we'll take out his family. So I think, and then they dumped money into his campaign, and all of a sudden people like Mark Zuckerberg are on board, and all of a sudden Jeff Bezos is on board, and Elon Musk is on board. That is the true, I don't even call them the deep state. I want to call them the global handlers at the top. They sent down the message through all their channels and said, we're going to make a switch. We can get it done through Trump now. We can do what we want through Trump. And most of the people, most of the baby boomers, and most of the conservative incorporated influencers will go along with it because we gave them such nonsense and such crazy leftist bullshit for 4 years that now just giving people some common sense stuff, and regarding gender, and a little bit better policy on the border, possibly a little bit better economy, and not doing insane things like having transgender dances on the White House lawn. Like, if we just give them that, then they'll go along with whatever war we want, whatever expansion that Netanyahu wants. I think that that's what's happening. So yes, while I approve of Trump's policies at the ground level in America, for the most part, from the day-to-day perspective, I'm very leery and suspicious about what's going on at a deeper and higher level that he really has no choice about. I think that he is a controlled president that's acting tough.
Jeremy, I think that last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes was probably the most insightful thing I've ever heard. I'm not even kidding. And definitely the most insightful thing on this podcast. I think you nailed it. And I'll be honest, I've thought a lot of those different things maybe separately. I've never really pieced it together the way you just articulated that. Dude, that was gold. That was gold. I think you just summed up everything I've been thinking in a clear and concise manner. And I hope everybody took away that. And I'm going to clip that because I think you really nailed it. Wow, you really nailed it. And especially linking the assassination to all of this. And it was almost like the assassination was a win-win. Had he died, it would have been a win. You put in Nikki Haley, or even at the time, if it was JD Vance. I mean, Vance is a puppet. Vance is Elon's guy, David Sachs's guy. Maybe not Elon's guy.
Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel's guy, David Sachs's guy, and then Nikki Haley, forget about it.
Which, let me connect the dot there. I mean, and you and your audience probably know this, but JD Vance, as much as I like his life story and things like that, he's very wrapped up in the Peter Thiel mafia. Well, Peter Thiel's artificial intelligence platforms are what provides the weapon system, their brain, for Israel. So he's making a ton of money
through Palantir.
Yes, that's right. So they are extremely tied into the interests of the Jewish state in Israel.
Yeah. All right, listen, this was awesome, man. I could go on for another hour, but I know you're nursing a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to let you go, and we're a little over an hour. I really enjoyed this, man. I really enjoyed this, and I thought we covered some amazing things. I'd love to do a follow-up and get into more of this stuff. But anyway, man, thank you very much. That was incredibly enjoyable. And like I said, man, that little 4-minute stretch that you just, dude, that's like Hall of Fame material.
Well, thank you, Ray. I appreciate it, man. You asked some great questions, and I love your attitude about all this and demeanor. And even though we hold maybe a different, little bit different religious value, or not values, but viewpoint, man, I just love your approach and your openness and your desire to see the truth be told. And I encourage your audience, man, the people out there watching this, speak the truth. Don't be afraid, because if you leave guys like me or guys like Ray being the only ones saying it, that's how we get taken down. But if more people are speaking the truth, man, they can't take all of us out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man, stay on the line. All right, everybody, hope you enjoyed it. Man, this was a double calling a spade a spade. So anyway, JSlay USA, I'm going to put all his links. I'm going to especially put his Substack, because I think his Substack is excellent. So, all right, Jeremy, hold on.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.